Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I am your host, Scott Wurtzbacher, and this is a podcast about listening to the voice inside that calls us to adventure. As our intro said, it's a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. Some people have shared with me that while they do feel ordinary, they don't feel that they have an extraordinary story to share. And today, we're going to talk about how we can change that story by rewriting it. Our guest is Donna Bond, who is here to share her own extraordinary story that she herself has rewritten. At age 45, Donna had what many would consider to be a very successful and award-winning career as a leading professional in the marketing industry. Yet she notes that she felt exhausted, depressed, unhappy, and unfulfilled. She's here to share with us how she decided to rewrite her story, which has led her to become a personal transformation consultant, spiritual mentor, coach, and published author of the book Original Wisdom, which I have my own signed copy of right here. I'm so excited. And most recently, her new story has helped her to really connect with her own voice that calls her to adventure by planning a full-time move to the beautiful rainforests of rugged Costa Rica. I am so excited to share Donna's story with you all. Donna, welcome to the Campfire.
Thank you, Scott. It's such an honor to be here with you. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, I am so excited. Donna, as we talked about in the intro, you have rewritten your story, and I would love it if we could just start right there, and maybe you could, just for the context of the listeners, like just share with us what that meant to you, rewriting that story.
Well, rewriting my story has become my entire life. I grew up the daughter of Italian-American immigrants, and we were all about hard work and sacrifice and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. And I put my nose to the grindstone and put my high heels on the rungs of the corporate ladder and started climbing. And when I was 44, I had a very significant awareness that that's how old my father was when he died. He died of lung cancer, and I was 22 at the time. But when I turned 44, I was like, holy smokes, I don't have very much time left. What am I doing here? And my life really felt like it was on repeat, that I would just get up and, it didn't really matter which company I was working for. I was a marketing executive in hospitality, actually, in the hotel business.
Got it.
And, it was super fun until it wasn't. And it served me until it didn't. But I woke up at 44 and suddenly heard that inner call for more meaning, more purpose, a bigger contribution of myself out in the world. And I had no idea what that looked like. And on the advice of a psychic,
nice,
I enrolled myself in a master's program in spiritual psychology at the University of Santa Monica. And it was totally illogical. There was nothing about it that made any sense at all. I was working 60 hours a week as a corporate executive. I was tired. I was exhausted. As you mentioned, I actually had disease growing in my body that I didn't even really know about. And here I was going to enroll myself in a master's program. It seemed ridiculous. And it was a lot of money. And I had no idea what I would do with such a thing. It was so out of left field, I have been a spiritual seeker since a young age, since I was about 12, which was what the interest was in doing that. But there was nothing logical about it. There was nothing that made sense about it. And it was the doorway into a whole other world of my life that was waiting to come forward, that was waiting to get birthed through me. And that was really the framework for my spiritual awakening and for the awakening into the knowing that we are so much more than what we've been taught by our history, our parents and our teachers and our governments and our religions and our cultures and all of the things
Yeah.
that shape us.
All of that stuff. So we talk often on this podcast about this voice inside that calls us to adventure. And you specifically said that you woke up at 45 and you felt an inner call. And I just wonder, you're somebody that's really thought deeply about this through study, through writing, and through direct experience. What did that inner calling feel like on that day?
It's such a big question. It's such a big question. That call is always hidden
Yeah.
behind our ego mind, our logic, our reason. And I have a really big ego. I have a really strong, critical, analytical, logical mind. And as I look behind myself and as I evaluate my life, these calls are often hidden behind so much resistance.
Mhm.
And, I've been doing this long enough now, and I've answered so many big calls that I recognize the resistance as part of it. I can sniff out the resistance and know that there's something behind it that is calling for my attention. And, my mother has always said that I was really impulsive since I was young. And it looks like impulse to anybody on the sidelines. But I think what happens, Scott, is there is this pull, there is this pull in a direction that might not make any sense. And I have been following that pull. And then I stop and I look around and I'm like, oh, what did we just do? Where are we now? Let me reassess. And the wake up call that I had at the time that I recognized I needed to leave my corporate profession
Mhm.
was an actual experience of being given divine knowing. I was on an airplane. I was reading a book. The book was called Finding Your Element. And my whole life I had been looking for my element. This was by Ken Robinson, and it
Yeah.
was assigned reading for my master's program.
Nice.
And I was at the very end of this book, and I was no closer to finding my element than I was at the beginning of the book. But I started reading where Robinson's talking about how we play it safe, right?
Mhm.
This is what we do in our life. We play
Mhm.
it safe.
Mhm.
And he was using all of these metaphors, Mark Twain's metaphor, 20 years from now, you're going to be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than
Mm.
by the things you did do. So sail away from the safe harbor, or throw off the bow lines, sail away from the safe harbor, explore, dream, discover. And as I'm reading this, I feel this energy moving through me. And then there was a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote that said, "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lie within us."
Mm.
And I'm like, even more energy is pushing its way through me. And then I get to the clincher, which was, I thought at the time, Anise Nin, but the actual author of this poem, her name is Elizabeth Appel, and the
Okay.
poem is called Risk. And then the day came when the risk to remain tight in the bud was more painful than the risk it takes to blossom. And I was suffering from a frozen shoulder at the time that I read that poem. And this metaphor of a bud that wants to blossom felt like my shoulder.
Your shoulder. Yeah.
And in that moment, all this emotion is moving through me. And I'm having this very clear awareness about how safe I've been playing it in my life. And the next thing I know, I have my knees clutched to my chest in an airplane. And I am sobbing as I am recognizing I have to quit my job. Like, I have to, and I'm going to. And it was absolutely crystal clear for me, even though I didn't have a clue or a plan or any idea, how I would financially support myself. And at that moment, it didn't matter. It didn't matter because I saw clearly that I needed to bust out of, this bud that was like, had to birth itself.
Yeah. Do you feel like that voice, do you feel like that had always been sort of calling at you and you just weren't listening, or was that the first time you heard it?
Oh yeah, I hadn't been listening. And, I have to say too, it's not the first time that I answered it with such impact. I met my husband on Match.com, and he was living in a different city than I was living in, and we communicated online for 30 days. And when we finally met in person, it was love at first sight. He proposed to me 2 weeks later without a ring or a plan or a clue. And I said yes. And that was another one of these, like, there was this inner alignment that was coming into play that didn't make any sense. I was 40 years old when this happened. I had had a ex-husband before that. My now husband had an ex-wife before that. So, we had some life experience behind us. Everybody was freaking out. My mother was like, "What are you doing?" My boss at the time was running a background check on him. But I had this inner knowing, this inner clarity that even though it all seemed ridiculous on the surface, there was a knowing. And, we've been in it now for 15 years.
Yeah.
So we did something right.
Yeah. So you answered that. So that was one of the answers to the call. And now you're in an airplane seat. You're kind of in the fetal position a little bit here. Like, so what was the choice that you made at that time, and what was the next step?
Well, the choice that I made was I was leaving my job. And what was so interesting was the airplane that I was on my way to the Ritz-Carlton Global Leadership Conference, where when I arrived at this conference, I arrived there like as a different person. I arrived there with this new insight, this new awareness about myself and my life. And I was very, very clear. I'm done. Like this is it. And so I moved through that entire conference with a different lens than the girl who normally would go to a conference like that. And I was sort of taking stock of my whole career, really aware of all that I had accomplished I call myself a middle-class ladder climber,
Nice.
And on the very last night, there's like a little bit of a story you have to hear before this. The day before I left for this meeting, my husband and I were reading Pam Grout's book, E Squared, 9 do-it-yourself experiments that your thoughts create your reality. And she's got all these experiments. And one of the experiments was to make a demand of the universe about something you want the universe to bring you. But the key was that you had to have absolutely no attachment to it, right?
Okay.
So there's like no energetic interference, like it's just random. So as my experiment, I said, universe, bring me an apple.
Okay.
Which at the time meant nothing to me, And I just sort of threw it out there, bring me an apple. And the next morning, I got on this airplane, to go to this conference. So it's the last night of the conference, and my name gets called to the stage where I am the recipient of the Western Regional Marketing Achievement Award for the 3rd consecutive year in a row. And I received the award, and as I'm walking back to my seat, I'm even more clear in my mind. Like, I'm out of here. You know what I mean? Like I'm going out on top. It's all good. This career has served me well, and I am ready to figure out like what's next. And I sit down, and they have just served dessert. And in typical Ritz-Carlton fashion, they give you a menu card, so you know exactly what it is you're looking at. And this was one of these, 5-course wine paired, elegant dinners.
Yep.
And the dessert that had just been served was this really elaborate apple extravaganza, right? Like with the green apple sorbet and apple confit and apple this and apple that. And I would have missed it if it hadn't been for the menu card. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm just envisioning, because you asked for an apple, like this seemingly simple thing, and what you got was this very complex apple.
Yeah.
Which is very cool.
It was so cool. It was so cool. And, in that moment, Scott, I really had an experience of my own soul, of my own recognition about this inner essence that we have, this inner power that we carry, that we overlook and override and overrule at our peril. And in that moment, this was happening. This emotion was coming forth, and I'm looking around this ballroom, with the twinkle lights, and the activity is still going on the stage. And I'm thinking to myself, gosh, no one would even believe me if I told them this story. And so I just sat there and marveled at the universe, marveled at my connection to the universe, and how extraordinary every minute really is in our life. And I just took it in. I just took that in. And it was such a nod to say, you're making the right choice.
Yeah.
Right? Like, keep going with your decision.
Yeah. And what I love about this is that, like, yes, it was a nod, but you got an award that night, which could have very easily, like, a lot of people see that as acknowledgement, right? And that could have very easily pulled you back.
Totally. Yes. And I love that you're bringing this up. Not a lot of people catch that. That's very insightful of you, but this happens a lot. When I left my job, there was still really nothing in my consciousness that was a coach, that was ready to show up as a coach, that even thought that I wanted to be a coach or I could be a coach. Like, it was still very far away from where I was. And so when I resigned from my position, I hung out a shingle as a marketing consultant. And I worked as a marketing consultant for about 1.5 years before I actually became a coach. And I went to the bank and I closed my bank account that said Donna Bond Marketing. And I opened a bank account that was Donna Bond Professional Coaching and Consulting. And don't you know, like 3 days after I opened up that bank account, Donna Bond Professional Coaching and Consulting, which was really significant, that I was saying to the universe, like, I'm all in. I'm all in as a coach. This is the direction I'm going in now. Didn't I get a call from a very big hotel company with a very big, lucrative opportunity for consulting, for marketing consulting? And I said no. And it was hard because I needed the money at the time. I needed the money. But I had to be true to the choice that I made. And, this is a significant part of the path. And I think people don't recognize how they self-betray on the regular. And this is where we really send mixed signals to the universe about what it is we want. And the more clarity we can demonstrate with the universe, the more the universe is like working on our behalf. And all we have to do is stay clear. So that was a really significant and important step on my journey where I was like, no, I'm closing that door. I'm closing the door to the hotel world and to the marketing world, and I'm opening the door to coaching.
Yeah.
And I've never really looked back.
I love it so much. So your story goes from this airplane ride to this convention that you're at, and you win an award, and you get this very, like I said, very, very complex and beautiful apple to really reassure you. And then you go on to University of Santa Monica, and you get your spiritual psychology degree, and this sort of unwakening unfolds. And I'm sort of fast forwarding to some of these details because I want to get to your book, and then I want to get to this adventure that you're getting ready to embark on, which is this move to Costa Rica. But I venture to guess that none of this, the Costa Rica thing, is sort of a manifestation of everything else.
Yeah, well, the Costa Rica thing is a surrender project. That's what it is. So yes, I went on to receive my master's with an emphasis in consciousness, health, and healing. And then I went on to get my coaching certification, and I went on to get my soul-centered facilitation certification, all from the University of Santa Monica. So I was at the University of Santa Monica for about 5 years. I'm a lifer.
Yeah.
I've been there. I was there a long time. And my career as a coaching professional, as a spiritual mentor, it's my honor and it's my privilege to do this work with people, to witness people moving through their own process of evolution. I am deeply grateful to be able to serve in this capacity. And I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So you've written this amazing book, Original Wisdom. And I want to, before we get to Costa Rica, just talk about what that means. What is original wisdom?
Yeah. Well, the full name of the book is Original Wisdom, Harness the Power of the Authentic You. And original wisdom is the inherent intelligence in all beings that is rooted in unconditional love. It is our true essence, right? It is our higher self, if you want to think about it that way. It is our soul essence. And the book wrote me. I actually set out to create a workshop. That's the truth. And I had this very elaborate 12 segmented workshop. And I kept looking for stories, right? I kept looking for those campfire stories to be able to tell for each of the teaching points that I intended to make throughout the book. And so I was like, oh, I have a story for this, and I have a story for that, and I have a story for this. And then I was like, oh my God, this is my story. This is my whole story of how I left the corporate arena and all of the challenges that I worked through along the way. It's the hero's journey. It is how I heard the call to adventure, how I left the safety and the comfort zone of my life and set out on this journey. And all of the gifts that were born within me along the way, all of the activations. This afternoon, I'm going to teach a class on entelechy. And entelechy is the fullest realized expression of something. And we all have an entelechy. Like the entelechy of a caterpillar is a butterfly, or the entelechy of an acorn is an oak tree. And so each one of us have this dynamic code that live inside of us. And I just lost my train of thought. It just went right out the window.
It's okay. I love that, this idea of the entelechy, and I'm just really grabbing onto this. The caterpillar becomes the butterfly, and the acorn becomes the oak tree. It's amazing. And we have an entelechy inside of us.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say. There's these periods of activation
Mm-hmm.
that we all go through in our life. And we might not recognize it as activation. But my theory is that each of these activations is what births our gifts inside of us. And then as those gifts are birthed, then the next opportunity for the next activation, comes forward. But they're sort of dovetailed on top of each other. And you can't get to the fifth one unless you go through the first one. And
Yes.
so it's all like the hero's journey over and over and over again, where we're constantly being called.
Yeah.
And this goes right into what's happening with Costa Rica.
Yeah. So
But I just wanted to answer any other questions about the book.
yeah, well, I had a quick question as you were talking. Like, do you think that the acorn knows that it is to become an oak tree? Do you think that the caterpillar knows that it is to become a butterfly?
What a beautiful question, Scott. You know why that's such a beautiful question? Because that's the point, I think, right? That's the point of our life. Like, at some point on my journey, I've realized I've come here to be Donna Bond, right? Like, I've come here to be Donna Bond in the fullest expression of Donna Bond.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to be, Marie Forleo. I'm never going to be whoever else. I can want for that. I can try to, mimic that or mirror that. But the truth is, I've come here to be me.
Yeah.
And the realization of that, I think, is part of this journey. And it's
Yeah.
part of our own recognizing the divine magnificence that each one of us brings to this life.
Yeah. So if I'm somebody and I feel like an acorn or I feel like a caterpillar and I can't see the butterfly and I can't see the oak tree, what would you say to those people? And by the way, you'd be speaking to me because I'm not sure I
Yeah,
can see the oak tree.
a little bit, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
because you have this dynamic code that is inside of you. It lives inside of you. And this code is held by your original wisdom, by your soul. And so it knows what it's doing, even when we logically and reasonably don't. Yeah.
I love it. I love this. So are we going to learn more about this in the book?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit. It's probably going to be more in the next book.
Yeah, I love that.
Always birthing new things.
I love that. Well, tell us just a little bit about what our readers are going to find in the book, and then we'll move on to Costa Rica.
Yeah, well, what you're going to find in the book is a whole set of mindset shifts and heart set shifts and soul sets, right? Like how to look at the world differently, how to relate to yourself differently, and thus relating to the world differently. I take you through my entire journey, how I left, a very lucrative, high viewed position with a lot of prestige and status, the identity crisis that I went through. The first time that it came forward for me that I wanted to be a spiritual coach, my ego was like, wait, what did she just say? Wait, hold on. Right. So that was super scary to come out in the world. Oh, people are going to think you're woo woo and wackadoodle-doo and the whole everything. So that was a, huge transition that I had to go through. And I share with the reader, all the inner turmoil that I worked through and give the reader not only insight into my own personal process, but there are tools along the way. At the end of each chapter, there's an opportunity for transformation. And this is the reader's chance to apply what they have just learned to their own life. So I offer activities and journaling exercises that can really provide somebody with their own journey of exploration.
Yeah. And it's fabulous. So highly recommend it. And so this journey that you've been on it's still in process. It's still happening. But this next phase is this move to Costa Rica. Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, well, and I want to just say something about the journey, and it's still going, it's still
Yes.
happening. One of the things that I've discovered along the path here, and I know that you know this, right? There is no destination. The gig's up. There is no destination. Like, as long as we're in these human bodies, the journey goes on. The journey goes on, and it's just this constant stretch of evolution, unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. And in our linear mind, we always want to think there's like a clear beginning and a clear end, because that's how we think, and there's time and space, and we want things to be clear and organized.
Yeah.
But that's not really how it works. And I believe our growth happens in a spiral.
Yeah.
And we go around that spiral, and every time we make another lap around the spiral, we go up a little and we go out a little. We go up a little and we go out a little. And that's how we gain more perspective, a higher viewpoint. But we live in this ever expanding universe. So because we are life itself in motion, we too are expanding all the time.
Yeah.
So I like to think, we take a lap around the spiral, and it's like, oh, we get to that little sticky spot again. Oh gosh, I thought I already worked on that. I thought I already healed that. I thought I was done with that. Well, maybe not. Maybe these are some of the core themes that we get to visit again and again and again throughout our lifetime. But each time we take that lap, we have a little bit more experience. We have a little bit more understanding. We see it from a different way or place now. And so we revisit it with all of that experience. And then we take another lap around,
Yeah.
So I just wanted to comment on that, because
No, and it's a beautiful, I really connect with how you talk about how you go up a little and you go out a little. Like I love this concept of the spiral.
yeah, and just this idea that there is no nirvana, right? Like, there is no final destination that we're going to get to, and oh, one day I'm going to wake up and be enlightened, and and then I don't have to do this anymore. But it's not really like that.
Yeah. So, all right, well, let's bring us to Costa Rica. How does this happen?
Well, Costa Rica called me. My mother bought 2.5 acres of land in Costa Rica about 13 years ago, and she was going to retire there, and she was on her way to becoming an expat. And on her way, she met a gentleman and fell in love and got married. And he said, Betty, we're not going to Costa Rica. So this land sat there for, more than a decade, and nothing was happening with it. And my mother wanted to gift it to us, to my husband and I, knowing my husband is an avid lifelong surfer, that he would do something with this. But I was quite resistant, actually, because I'm like more of a California girl. I like high heel shoes and Gucci bags. I like the California climate, not necessarily the tropics.
Yeah.
But we went to Costa Rica, and of course it's magical in all of the ways that you imagine it is. And my husband and I agreed to accept this land. And this was in 2019.
Okay.
And then we thought about, we're going to maybe one day build a house there. But we didn't have any money to build a house. And I didn't want to double mortgage our home in California. So I kept saying to my husband, we'll build a house when the money falls out of the sky. Well, hey, guess what, Scott? The money fell out of the sky. Paul's father passed away, and we received an inheritance. And the inheritance was almost exactly what we needed to build this house. So we flew to Costa Rica in March of 2020, which was a pretty significant time around the world, if you remember.
It was.
And we signed a contract with a builder to start construction on our home in the rainforest jungle on the South Pacific. And we came back to America and they closed the country and we could not get back into Costa Rica for nearly a year. And so our entire home got built over WhatsApp. And that itself really was an exercise in letting go of control, in surrendering, in trusting. So many things, right? Our big financial investment is now in somebody else's hands. We can't even go there.
Yep.
And our builder, amazing guy, Deegan Wilcox with Jungle Tech, built us an incredible home. And we started renting out the home in 2021. And a lot of people from all over the world were looking for respite and, time away from wherever they were. And the whole world started working on Zoom. And people were like, well, if I can work on Zoom, I might as well do it from someplace amazing.
Right.
So the house has literally been rented since the day, it was available.
Yeah.
And this past March, I facilitated my very first women's retreat there. And we were spending about a month in Costa Rica, but it was over the course of this women's retreat, I kept receiving these very big energetic downloads. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, it's great description.
These energetic downloads of knowingness, right? This knowingness that I am to come here. And, let me tell you, my ego and personality, not really on board with this.
Yeah.
As I continue along my journey in the world, my aspirations for my life look very, very different than what they used to look like when I was a corporate marketing executive. And, one of the most important things to me is embodying as much of my spirit, as much of my original wisdom as is possible in this vessel, in this body, in this life. Like, that's my goal, if you will. And that requires a continual shedding of the personality, right? It requires an even deeper letting go process of our patterns, our comforts, our safety nets. And as much transformation as I think that I've already had, I'm also aware the transformation is limitless. It really is. There's so much more to go. There's so much more to experience.
More to come. So I think what's cool about this is you and I met right around that. I think it was shortly after March 2020. It's probably maybe 2 or 3 months after that you had acquired this land and you were just starting this process. And if I remember correctly, like you were building this house, but it wasn't, I don't think it had manifested yet that, this is a place that we're going to move to. It was more like you said, kind of investment property. So this was something, it's kind of like going around that spiral, right?
Oh my God, you're so right.
Sort of evolved. Like you didn't create this vision in your head, like we're going to build a house in Costa Rica and move there.
Correct.
It was a journey and a process. You didn't see the oak tree.
No, I didn't. I did not see the oak tree. And I still don't. I still don't. It just became clear. And my husband and I left Costa Rica. We flew back to California. We're landing at LAX and we look out the window and all we see is cement. Like for as long as the eye could see in LA, all we could see is cement. And we sort of looked at each other, with our heart hurting. Gosh, we want to be back in the jungle. We want to be back in the green with the toucans and the monkeys and the bugs and all of it. And very, very shortly thereafter, like within a couple of weeks, we said, what would it look like if we sold our house? And we started making up like outlandish gatekeepers. We said, well, if we can get this number on our house, then we'll do it. Right. So then we started having a conversation with our realtor. Well, it all happened much quicker than we ever thought it could happen. And there have been, I mean, it has been ease and grace. The way in which the sea has parted and we have been coaster rided down this path to Costa Rica. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Our house sold within 48 hours for a ridiculous price.
Yeah.
And we were given the opportunity to stay here in the home for free for 4 months. And as I was sharing with you earlier, the beautiful couple who bought our home, they want all of our furniture. Like, what are the chances? Because I'm moving into a house that's fully furnished in Costa Rica, right?
Yeah.
So there have just been so many alignments. There's been so many weird, serendipitous, synchronistic things that have unfolded here. And I'm sort of sitting back with my hands up, not pushing, not directing, not forcing. I am being carried. We are being carried. And so as all of this has happened, then we wake up every morning at like 3 a.m. and we're like, oh, what did we just do? What did we just do? Yeah. So it's scary. It is scary. And I just submitted an article to the San Clemente Journal called Letting Go. And we're going through the process of letting go and what that really looks like and how to do it and how to honor the journey that we're on and where we've come from. And as we set our sights on something that we don't really know what it is.
Yeah. And in so many ways, you were telling me before the call, like you guys are in the process of starting to let go of your stuff there in Southern California so that you can make this move. So there's, a lot of letting go. And then you called this whole Costa Rica thing your surrender project.
Yeah. Well, that was Michael Singer's book, that was the name of one of his great masterpieces, but that is what it is. I really am envisioning, and I don't know if I can do it, Scott, but I am envisioning clicking it down a notch with the energy I put forth in, making my business go, if that makes sense. You wake up at 5 o'clock in Costa Rica, the whole jungle wakes up at 5 o'clock. So you can have like an entire day by 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And I'm most excited. We're building an art studio for my husband and a whole office building on our land. We're adding a yoga shala where I envision working with clients, doing workshops in this yoga shala. And I want to expand my already long morning ritual and spiritual practice where I'm now communing in nature, which is big for me. Because like I said to you before, I'm kind of a California girl. I'm an indoor girl. I'm really being called out of my comfort zone on so many levels here.
Yeah.
And that's why there's so much surrender required.
Well, I got to tell you, you got my attention because Costa Rican coffee, early mornings, being in nature, surrounded by animals. Like
I know.
Like I'm there at some point.
Come, we'll build a fire. We'll tell stories.
I love it. So, hey, so what's cool about this is like, it's happened. You've built the house. It's ready to go. Like you're getting on the plane, but you're not there yet. So this is still in process. And I'm just curious, like, are you feeling resistance? Like, what are some of your fears around all of this?
Yeah, really what we're both moving through right now is this letting go process. It's so easy to pretend like, we're dying. We're never going to come back to California again, even though that's not true, right? That's a story. Our business is going to still be based here. As a matter of fact, we have a beautiful client base, both my husband's business, Paul Bond Fine Art, and myself. We're going to be back here. You know what I mean? Like on the regular. And our day-to-day life is going to be very different. So we are downsizing with all of our stuff, right? Like
Mhm.
we got a lot of stuff,
Mhm.
100+ years combined of stuff that we've been carrying around. And just really moving through the tenderness of all the history that we have here in California. I grew up in Connecticut, actually, but I've lived here for the past 20 years. So there's a lot of letting go. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's
Yep.
tender, it's raw, it's real, and it's humbling.
But you have the awareness to know that it has to happen, and that's what you're doing. I mean, it's there's so much courage in that, and just like
Yeah,
seeing it and stepping through the door. Like you are answering that
yeah.
voice that's called you to adventure. And that's
There's no
what it's all
question.
about. It's amazing. So let's talk about how others can do the same, right? So first of all, they've got to get a copy of your book, Original Wisdom, Harness the Power of the Authentic You. That's a great place to start. But they've clicked send, it's in their Amazon cart and it's on their way to their house. Until that time, what advice do you have for people that have maybe heard that call to adventure, but maybe they're letting some of that resistance keep them from answering it?
Mm. Um, you can't make a wrong move. You can't make a wrong move. Life is always inviting us into our next level of potential. Life is always inviting us into different ways that we can grow and learn and evolve. And when we see it that way, which is really the basis for spiritual psychology, which is the modality by which I coach with, and that's what was innovated and created by Drs. Ron and Mary Holnick at the University of Santa Monica.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual psychology teaches us that all of life is for learning, right? Like everything that's happening is giving us that next gateway to activate our entelechy.
Mm.
And most of the time, we move through life feeling victimized by its crazy circumstances and by, its unpredictability. But that's just life, doing life. When we can begin to view it in a different way, what's here for me? How can I grow through this? What can I garner and take away as a result of, this difficult situation? That's a whole different perspective on life. And when we hold that perspective all of the time, then we are seated in a place of empowerment and we are participating in our life at a different level rather than feeling like life is just coming at us with its uncertainty. So it's a whole paradigm shift.
It's a paradigm shift. I love that. It is. That's exactly right. And you have taken your life story and you've rewritten it. You've rewritten it into a book. And soon, very soon, you're going to be living in the rainforest in the jungle in Costa Rica. And Hollywood's going to hear about this. And they're going to want to make a movie about your life. And
Uh-huh.
so what I want to know is who's going to be the actress that's going to play you in your movie?
Oh my God. Linda Carter.
Oh, yes.
Linda Carter.
Wonder Woman.
Scott, so this is so crazy. You asked me about this question before we began the show. And when I was younger, I used to get it all the time. People would all the time sort of match me up with her. Like, but this is from 30 years ago,
Love it.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So last night I think to myself, well, I wonder what she looks like now. Like, what is she even up to? What is she doing? And I Google her and she just launched an album called Human and Divine.
Ooh,
And I was
nice.
like, you can't even make this up, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a little bit weird because really that's what my whole mission is to help people recognize that they have these two very beautiful parts of themselves, right? Like that we have all of this humanness,
Yeah.
our ego and our personality, but we also have our original wisdom. And when we can begin to recognize that original wisdom and incorporate that into how we live our life on a day-to-day basis, then things really begin to change in a beautiful way.
Kindred spirits, you and Linda Carter.
Crazy.
I love this. Okay, what's your movie going to be called?
Oh my God. You can't make this shit up.
You can't make this shit up with Linda Carter. There you go. That's it right there. I love it. Well, Donna, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate you spending some time with us today and sharing your original wisdom with us. I hope that for those listening, you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope that Donna's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or you need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire on your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Donna, thank you so much for being here.
Scott. Thanks for having me.